What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Bryce Crawford podcast. I'm Bryce, and in today's episode, we're on Luke chapter 9. Thank you guys for following along on the Luke Christmas series. Every day we're reading a chapter of Luke, so by the time you get to Christmas Eve, you would have read the whole Gospel of Luke. We're literally reading it verse by verse on the podcast, so if you're at least listening to these, you would have read the whole book of Luke. It's powerful. Before we get into it, guys, first ever live podcast show, January 19th, 6 p.m. in Los Angeles. Go to jesusinthestreet.org/tickets and get your tickets. Come out to the show. It's going to be a powerful night. I'm super excited. It's going to be awesome. And I think we're going to have some merch at the event that won't be on the website. So you guys should come. It's going to be awesome. I'm excited. Now, let's jump into Luke chapter 9. And he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. Okay, so now Jesus is sending out the 12 disciples to go do some ministry here, and he's giving them power to heal the sick and cast out demons. He is equipping them. When God calls us, he equips us as well. Take nothing for your journey, no staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics. And whatever house you enter, stay there, and from there depart. And wherever they do not receive you, when you leave that town, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. He's saying, look, don't try to convince people to follow this. He's like, just lay the truth on them. And if they receive it, bless them. If they don't, shake the dust off your feet, move on to the next people, because there's people that need it. Jesus says that the harvest is ripe. So he says, don't take offense, keep moving. And they departed and went through the villages, preaching the gospel and healing everywhere. Notice that the supernatural isn't separate from the gospel. Okay? Oftentimes you'll see people, they separate the two. No, they go hand in hand. Like the gospel should be our leading leg, and then we can use, like God will give us the ability to use the supernatural to soften people's hearts or to set people free and to show them that the gospel is true. It's powerful. King Herod. Now Herod, the tetrarch, heard about all that was happening, and he was perplexed, because it was said by someone that John had been raised from the dead, by some that Elijah had appeared, and by others that one of the prophets of old had risen. So we're going to see this here in a second in Luke chapter 9, where Jesus asks the disciples who the people say he is, because some mistake him as John the Baptist still. Some think he's Elijah, because if you guys know, Elijah didn't die. He got taken up to heaven in the Old Testament. And it says in verse 9, Herod said, John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear such things, as he sought to see him? So he knows, all right, John the Baptist got beheaded. You guys remember, he arrested John the Baptist, didn't kill him because the people loved him. And then a couple days later, someone did a striptease for Herod, and he beheaded John the Baptist because that lady wanted his head on a platter. So he goes, all right, this Jesus guy, I'm interested in him. Maybe not necessarily because King Herod was some spiritual guru in search for truth. It was more so probably because Jesus was famous amongst the people. Now, Jesus is about to feed the 5,000 here. On their return, the apostles told him all they had done. And he took them and withdrew apart to a town called Bethsaida. And when the crowd learned it, they followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them of the kingdom of God and cured those who had need of healing. Now the day began to wear away, and the 12 came and said to him, send the crowd away to go into the surrounding villages and countryside to find lodging and get provisions, for we are here in your desolate place. But he said to them, you give them something to eat? Now, here's the thing. The disciples had no way, shape, or form. They didn't have the supplies. They didn't have the money to feed 5,000 people. So Jesus is challenging them both in their faith and compassion. He's like, don't send them away. Like, let's serve them. But he's also saying, do you have faith in me? We can provide. They said, we have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we are to go and buy food for all these people. For there were about 5,000 men. Now, when you hear the story of the 5,000, it only counts for the men. Think about how many other women and children were there. And he said to the disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each. And they did so and had them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing over them. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. And they all ate and were satisfied. And what was left over was picked up, 12 baskets of broken pieces. Again, he challenges them in both their faith and compassion for people. Trust in me to provide, but also have compassion on people. Don't just send them away. Now, we're about to see what I just referenced here when Herod was perplexed. And he's in verse 18. He goes, now it happened as he was praying alone, the disciples were with him, and he asked them, who do the crowd say I am? And they answered him, they think you're John the Baptist, but others say Elijah, and others that one of the prophets of old had risen. Then he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Peter answered, the Christ of God. Peter gets a supernatural understanding that Jesus is the Christ, that he's not some Joe Schmo, he's not just like a man sent from God. No, he is God in the flesh. It's powerful, powerful. And he strictly charged them and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Jesus foretells his death, and I love how he says he must suffer. Like it is a guarantee he must suffer for the sins of the world in order that they be paid for. It's powerful. Now, I love how this is going to correlate with the next passage here when he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever saves his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. He's saying, look, have the same intention. Like it's almost a guarantee. Like if you follow me, you're probably going to suffer like me. You're probably going to be rejected by men like me. But listen, have that same intention, like know what you're signing up for. Have that same heart posture of being willing to suffer for my sake. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits himself? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and of the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet forfeits his soul? There's no amount of drugs, there's no amount of sex, there's no amount of money, there's no amount of people-pleasing that you can do that's actually going to save you. The hole in your heart will never be filled with anything of this world. It's all fading. But the only thing that could sustain us is something eternal, something perfect. My thought process is, if I live in an imperfect world with a hole in my heart, and I as an imperfect man can't fix the hole in my heart in an imperfect world, then how could I work to perfection? It's impossible. That's why we needed perfection to die on a cross for us so that perfection can fill the hole in our heart and make us whole and pure in his sight and righteous and blameless. The transfiguration. This is a powerful passage. This is probably what, if you guys watch the TikTok summary I do, this is probably what I've talked about on the TikTok summary because I think it's so powerful. I'm going to read through the story here, and I'm going to highlight something. Now, about 8 days after these sayings, he took with him Peter, James, and John, and they went up on a mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now, let's stop right there. In the Old Testament, God promised Moses that he would enter the promised land, that he would lead the Israelites into the promised land. Then at one point, Moses gets frustrated at God, and he strikes a rock, and God punishes him and says, oh, no, psych, and he dies before he enters the promised land. Now, some might say, well, God doesn't keep his promises. Look, he told Moses he was going to enter into the promised land, and then he doesn't. But the same mountain that Moses and Elijah appear on and step foot on is the promised land. It's the modern-day promised land in this time. So God is a promise keeper. Moses stepped foot in the promised land on the transfiguration. What a powerful moment. Now Peter and those who were with him were heavy with sleep, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, is it good that we're here? Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. Peter don't want the glory to end. That brother don't want the moment to end. As he was saying these things, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came from the cloud saying, This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent and told no one in those days anything of what they had seen. I don't know how else to describe the transfiguration other than Jesus glowing on a mountain. I don't really understand what's going on. It's just like he's glorified by God the Father, and it's powerful. Verse 37, on the next day when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. And behold, a man from the crowd cried out, Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he's my only child. And behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out, and convulses him so that he foams at the mouth and shatters him and will hardly leave him. And I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Why they couldn't cast it out, I don't know. I don't know why they couldn't cast it out, but this is a learning lesson. Just because they couldn't doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's a learning lesson for them. Maybe it was too strong. I don't know. But Jesus said, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here. While he was coming, the demon threw him down to the ground and convulsed him. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the boy and gave him back to his father, all were astonished at the majesty of God. But while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to the disciples, Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. Jesus is about to suffer and die on the cross. He's foretelling it again. But they did not understand this saying. It was concealed from them, so that they might not perceive it, and they were afraid to ask him about this saying. Verse 46, an argument arose among them as to which of them was the greatest. Look, the disciples getting prideful. Which one of us is the greatest? Can you imagine? I wonder how Peter felt, all right? He's like, I'm in the inner circle. I'm Peter, James, and John. I'm its close three friends. Like, I'm definitely the favorite. I wonder how they are competing. But Jesus, knowing the reasoning of their hearts, took a child and put him by his side. And he said to them, whoever receives this child in my name receives me. And whoever receives me receives him who sent me. For he who is least among you is the one who is great. It's actually the humble that will be exalted. And he actually calls us here to do something. He calls us to have childlike faith. Jesus doesn't call us to be childish in our faith, return evil for evil, be slow to speak. Quick to speak, slow to listen. He doesn't call us to be childish. He calls us to be childlike. What does it mean to be childlike? When you have a kid and you tell the kid that the Easter bunny is real, you don't have to convince the child that the Easter bunny is real. Man, a child when they're young, they grab hold to every word you say as if it is 100% honest truth. And whatever you say to a kid when they're young, they just don't, without a doubt, they believe you and they hold on to it and they fully embrace whatever you tell them. And Jesus says, if you were to be childlike, you're going to fully embrace everything I say. You're going to receive me as if, because I am 100% the truth, I am God in the flesh, you're going to receive me without a doubt. And you're going to embrace me like a child would when you tell him the Easter bunny is real. He's going to get excited about the Easter bunny and to celebrate, and you're going to get excited about me just like a child would. So powerful. John answered, Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to stop him because he doesn't follow with us. But Jesus said to him, do not stop him, for the one who is not against you is for you. He's saying, look, there's no competition for people who are all working in the kingdom of heaven. If they're casting them out in my name, let him keep casting it out. Because there's no exclusivity or partiality just because you're a disciple of mine, is what he says. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent some messengers ahead of him, who went and entered the village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But the people did not receive him, because his face was set towards Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? But he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. So just because the Samaritan village rejected Jesus, the disciples were like, yo, let's burn that place down. Let's burn it. And Jesus actually rebukes him. It's like, yo, have compassion on them. They just don't understand. And I love that perspective, because it's like when people reject us because of the gospel, it's like sometimes we get frustrated. It's like, oh, we should get frustrated. They just don't understand. Have grace. They just don't know they're my best friend yet. They just don't know Jesus yet. They just don't know that they're about to be best friends with Jesus. Like let's just understand. Let's close out chapter 9. As they were going along the road, someone said to them, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He says, look, following me is uncomfortable. Following me is uncomfortable. There's some days that it's hard. It's not this glamorous, luxurious life that even nowadays some prosperity preachers paint the picture of. That the life of Jesus is this glamorous, luxurious life. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's hard. There are times like like things get hard. You don't have access to resources. And Jesus is like, look, it's not going to be luxurious all the time. To another, he said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus to him says, leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. So he says, let me go bury my father first. And he's like, look, listen, this might be an ongoing, long, indefinite process for this guy. And he says, look, you might be delaying this process to follow me. But he's like, look, the dead bury their own dead. We got people that are dying and that are sick spiritually right now. We need to save them. Yet another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home. And he's like, look, now instead of an indefinite, maybe long waiting period like the second guy did, he's like, this last guy's like, this will be quick. Let me just go say goodbye to my family. He says, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. When farmers would plow the field, they were so dead set and focused on the thing before them that it allowed them to plow the rows. And he says, look, the gospel is the goal. Preaching the gospel is the goal. I, Jesus Christ, am the prize, is what he says. I am the main focus. Let's keep our eyes on the prize. Guys, I pray that Luke 9 bless you guys. Guys, if you want to come to the live podcast show in Los Angeles, January 19th, go to jesusinthestreet.org/tickets. Get your tickets. Love you guys. See you guys tomorrow for Luke chapter 10.